Okay, so if you've ever tried to learn technical analysis, you've almost certainly hit that candlestick pattern wall. Hammers, shooting stars, engulfing patterns, they tell you to memorize dozens of names, and it just gets overwhelming fast. But what if there's a much smarter, way more intuitive way to read these charts? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. First things first, before we get to the solution, we really need to understand the big problem that trips up so many traders. I like to call it the memorization trap. Sound familiar? You spend hours, maybe even days, trying to cram dozens of patterns into your brain. But then when you pull up a live chart, it's all just a blur. You can't remember the names or what on earth they're supposed to mean. It's a super common and, let's be honest, incredibly frustrating cycle. And this right here is the heart of the problem. You're handed charts packed with ascending triangles, double tops, and falling wedges, and the advice is just memorize them. But this just creates this endless loop, right? You learn, you forget, and then you're right back to trying to memorize everything again. That isn't trading, it's a memory test. You're pretty much guaranteed to fail. So, what's the way out? What's the solution? Well, it's a simple but really powerful shift in how you look at the chart. Instead of trying to memorize the names of the patterns, you learn to read the story that they're actually telling you. At its core, this whole new approach comes down to one simple idea. Every single candle you see on a chart represents a battle. You've got the buyers, the bulls, who are fighting tooth and nail to push the price up, and you've got the sellers, the bears, fighting to push it right back down. The open, high, low, and close, that's just the scoreboard of that battle over a specific period of time. And that ongoing battle, that constant struggle, is what creates the narrative we call price action. That is the story we need to learn how to read. Once you can understand the psychology behind this fight, believe me, you won't need to remember a single pattern name ever again. So, how do you actually read that story? Well, according to our source material, it all boils down to asking two really simple questions for any candle you see. First, where did it close? This tells you who won the battle. Was it the buyers or the sellers? And second, how big is the candle? This tells you how decisive that victory really was. Okay, theory is great, but let's put this into practice. We'll start with a classic example of bullish rejection, a story where the buyers make a really dramatic comeback. We'll take a look at a pattern many of you probably know as the hammer. But for a second, just forget that name. Let's just read the story of the candle itself. Let's break down the play by play of what happened here. So the session opens, and boom, sellers immediately take control, pushing the price way down. That long lower wick, that shows their initial dominance. But then something happens. At a key point, buyers see an opportunity. They storm in, fighting back with so much force that they push the price all the way back up to close right near the high for the session. So, what's the big takeaway from that story? The sellers tried their absolute best to sink the price, and they failed. The buyers didn't just fight back, they won the session and they won it decisively. This shows really strong buying pressure and gives us a big hint that a reversal to the upside could be coming. And you figured all of that out just by reading the story, not by remembering a name. And guess what? This same logic works perfectly in reverse. So now, let's look at the opposite story, a clear case of bearish rejection, where the sellers completely overwhelmed the buyers. This time, we'll look at what's commonly called a shooting star. But again, don't get hung up on the name. Just focus on the narrative of the battle. Here, the whole story is flipped on its head. The session opens, and the buyers are feeling confident. They push the price way up. That long upper wick shows their initial strength, but then they hit a wall. Sellers look at that price, decide it's way too high, and step in with overwhelming force, slamming the price all the way back down to close near the session's low. And the interpretation is just as clear, right? The buyers gave it their best shot, but were totally rejected and overpowered. Sellers are now in the driver's seat. This signals some serious selling pressure and the possibility of a downward reversal. See how simple it is when you're just reading the price action? Now, this whole storytelling method isn't just for single candles. This is where it gets really powerful. You can apply the exact same thinking to groups of candles to understand the bigger picture, all without memorizing even more complicated patterns. As our source material puts it beautifully, the key is to look at the price action of these three candles together as one candle. And to do this, it's pretty simple. You just take the opening price of the very first candle, the closing price of the very last candle, and then the absolute highest and lowest points of that whole sequence. What you're really doing is creating one big summary candle that tells you the story of that entire period. So, for instance, even if you have a down candle sandwiched between two up candles, the summary candle might show that the buyers still won. The period opened low and closed high. This lets you read the story of complex patterns like a morning star without ever needing to know its name. You just see the combined story and realize, buyers have taken firm control here. So from now on, when you look at a chart, stop asking yourself, what pattern is this? Instead, ask a much, much more powerful question. What story is this chart telling me right now? Who is winning the battle, and how strong is their momentum? That simple shift right there is what turns you from a pattern memorizer into a true chart reader.